Vietnam and Thailand are both incredible destinations, but could choosing the wrong country ruin your trip? In this travel guide, we're giving first-time travelers the brutal truth you need to know before planning a trip to Thailand and Vietnam. When I first visited Vietnam, I was strongly warned by the hotel staff not to try eating at the street food stalls, unless of course I wanted to end up sick. On our latest trip, we decided to take that risk. I'm really glad that we did. To help you avoid spending your vacation in the hotel bathroom with food poisoning, here are some simple steps that you can follow for eating street food in both countries. First, start by seeing which street food stalls are busy with the locals. This has two benefits. First of all, the locals are more likely to know which places are good and which are bad. But the second benefit is that a busy stall or restaurant is going to have a high turnover and therefore fresher ingredients. The next thing to look out for is the cleanliness of the cooking area and the area surrounding it. If garbage and food scraps are strewn everywhere, then that's a big warning sign that the owner just doesn't care about hygiene. You also want to keep an eye out for the freshness of the ingredients. This is especially critical in Vietnamese cooking that relies very heavily on fresh vegetables and herbs. Produce that is wilted, slimy, or exposed to dirt from the sidewalk or the road is a bad sign. If you're ordering meat or seafood dishes, you also want to make sure that those ingredients are being kept on ice and not exposed to flies. If you're worried about the freshness of ingredients, you might think that eating deep-fried food would be an easy way to stay safe. After all, the food is cooked at a very high temperature, so bacteria can't possibly survive. That is technically true, but in Vietnam, the oil itself can actually make you really sick. Unfortunately, my wife got food poisoning from bad oil when we were in Sapa, Vietnam, after she ate some deep-fried spring rolls. Luckily, it wasn't too severe, and she recovered after 3 days of counting tiles in the bathroom. A huge cooking oil scandal in Vietnam came to light last year when authorities dismantled a huge network of companies that had been selling vegetable oil meant for animal feed as human-grade cooking oil. Even if you're not accidentally consuming animal feed oil, you might still be eating oil that has become toxic from being reused too many times or even being stored improperly. Given the tiny margins that street stalls rely on, this is a significant risk. The best way to deal with this risk is just to use your senses. First, take a look at the oil and see if it looks fresh. It should be pretty see-through and not dark. Next, try to smell the oil. If there's an acrid smell in the air or if the smoke is making you cough, just don't eat there. If it's your first time planning a trip to Vietnam or Thailand, it can be really overwhelming to find all the best places to visit and then try to weed out the tourist traps. That's why we've created an interactive Google map and travel guide with over 100 curated locations for each country, including hidden temples, fantastic homestays and hotels, along with our favorite restaurants and street stalls. Our maps will help you get the absolute most out of your trip to Thailand or Vietnam. Our personal tips are also included in each map pin. You can download the maps directly into your Google Maps app. That way you can find the best spots just at the click of a button. You'll find the link in the description, or you can just scan the QR code on the screen. Now that you know how to safely enjoy the variety of street food that both Vietnam and Thailand have to offer, let's talk about a few key differences. Thailand is known for its curries, and you'll see lots of little street stalls selling them. Sometimes they're kept warm, but not always. If you want to be as safe as possible, you should avoid eating curries that have been sitting out and getting cold. The trick is to eat them as fresh as possible. For example, many stalls will make a huge batch for lunch and then have it sit out for the rest of the day. The curry is probably going to be safe to eat for the first couple of hours, but it won't be great after sitting out for half a day. The other uniquely Thai item that you want to be careful of is any variation of pad Thai or pad siu. Especially in the tourist areas, it's not unusual to see big plates of noodles sitting out pre-cooked waiting for someone to order it. That's a terrible food practice, and you should avoid those places like the plague. In general, you should always try and stick to food that is made fresh right in front of you. If it's something like a stir-fry that's fried at a high temperature, then that's even better. I've spent a lot of time talking about street food stalls, but from reading hundreds of forum posts and talking to other travelers, one of the biggest culprits of food poisoning is often restaurants serving Western food. So next time that you're craving a burger or some pasta in Vietnam or Thailand, you might want to give that a second thought. You should also be really careful with small hotel restaurants. These often don't have a high turnover, and so the ingredients are less likely to be as fresh compared to a busy street food stall. If you avoid the tourist markets in Thailand, then on the whole, I would say that eating out in Thailand is going to be both easier and safer for the first-time traveler than Vietnam. And this mostly comes down to the fact that a lot of Thai dishes are stir-fried, which is a great way to kill bacteria. In comparison, the fresh veggies that you eat raw in Vietnamese food can easily carry bacteria from dirty water. Small scams that target tourists are prevalent in both Thailand and Vietnam. However, there is one scam that is exceptionally common in Vietnam. But let's start with taxis, and these are a big no-go in both countries. From overcharging, shortchanging, switching the bills, pretending the meter is broken, to taking the scenic route, there are so many ways that taxis can scam you in Thailand and Vietnam that it is just not even worth the hassle. The good news is that ride-hailing apps are available in both countries. As long as you're traveling within the major urban areas, they're both popular, affordable, and easy to use. Grab is the biggest ride-hailing company in both countries, but in Thailand it's also worth downloading Bolt, which is a European ride-hailing company that's expanding in Asia. In Vietnam, you'll also want to download the Shan SM app. That's a ride-hailing app that exclusively uses electric cars, but their prices are usually just as good or better than Grab. Because Grab is so popular, it's actually led to a really common scam. But before we get to that, make sure you subscribe for more brutally honest travel guides that'll turn your trip into a success. Especially in Vietnam, it is very common to see people standing around in Grab jackets at the airport trying to convince you to take a ride with them instead of just waiting for someone to accept you on the app. The trick here is just to say no thank you. The prices that these fake drivers are offering are usually going to be massively inflated on the hope that tourists won't realize it, and of course you have no guarantee that these guys won't change the price on you later. Make sure you only book Grab rides through the app, and verify that the driver and the license plate matches what's shown in the app before you get in. Vietnam also has a lot of hotel scams that can throw your entire trip off course. The biggest scam is the fake hotel scam. This is where they advertise their hotel using pictures from a completely different property that sometimes doesn't even belong to them. When you show up to the address, you're simply left confused as there's either no hotel there or it looks completely different, for the worse, than what was advertised online. Another common hotel scam is the bait and switch. You might see great reviews and some really good looking pictures online, but when you arrive at the property, it's magically completely full. So they've transferred your booking to a sister property that is supposedly just as good. It usually never is, and the sister property does not in any way match what you booked. There's two ways that you can combat this hotel scam. One way is to look at the lowest review scores for the hotel in Google Maps. You can also look at the lowest scores on the hotel booking platform, as there's a good chance that other tourists have fallen victim to the same scam. But if you want our tried and tested recommendations, you can also download our Vietnam map, where we've listed the hotels that we recommend in Hanoi, Ninh Binh, and Hoi An. You should also be very careful when renting a scooter in either country, as the fake damage scam is a worldwide classic. When you return the scooter, they'll claim that you caused a scratch or a dent that was already there when you rented it. This very quickly turns into a he said, she said argument, and there's just no great outcome. The easiest way to combat this scam is to take detailed pictures and videos off the scooter before you even sign the paperwork. You should also take it for a quick test drive just to make sure that there isn't anything wrong with the steering or the suspension. There are plenty of other scams that you can fall prey to in Vietnam, and we actually made a whole video on it that you can watch afterwards. In general, you have to be a little bit more cautious and suspicious in Vietnam, just because the business culture can be quite ruthless. Thailand and Vietnam are both affordable countries by Western standards, but has one of them become too expensive for what they can offer? There seems to be a growing trend lately in lamenting how Thailand has become really expensive and promoting Vietnam as the new go-to budget holiday destination. Without turning this into an economics video, let me just say that the trend does have a grain of truth, but as you can imagine, it gets a lot of things wrong. For a lot of people, the only Thailand they ever see is the tourist areas of Bangkok, Pattaya, Koh Samui, and Phuket. Those destinations have all become a lot more expensive as increasing amounts of money flow into them. And that's not just from tourists, it's also from wealthy locals. So, if your travel style is all about staying in the tourist hubs and luxury hotels, then you will absolutely be paying more for a trip to Thailand. But even in places like Bangkok, you can still find local neighborhoods where a stir-fried curry costs you less than $2 and an iced coffee strong enough to wake up the dead will only cost you $1. But if you go to a tourist restaurant in Thailand, that same curry will now cost you at least $5. That's obviously more expensive than the local price, but it's still not anywhere near what a meal out would cost you in the US. So don't dismiss a visit to Thailand just because you've heard that it's become expensive. Vietnam has the exact same dichotomy. If you visit a local banh mi stall outside of the tourist areas, you'll probably pay less than $1 for it. But if you go to a tourist area, such as the old town of Hanoi, you can easily end up paying almost double that. That's obviously still ridiculously cheap by Western standards, but it highlights the difference between the tourist and the local economy. If you want the absolute cheapest vacation and you don't feel like venturing into the local neighborhoods and restaurants, then Vietnam is still the winner for now. But as their tourism numbers grow, Vietnam is going to become more expensive. Now let's talk about which country is going to be the safest to travel in if it's your first time visiting Southeast Asia. It's pretty hard finding current statistics from Vietnam and Thailand. The only data that I could find was from 2014, which I don't think is all that helpful. But on a personal level, I can say that we never felt unsafe walking around random alleyways in either Thailand or Vietnam. In fact, the only times where I was worried about being pickpocketed or scammed was when we walked through Beer Street in Hanoi and Khao San Road in Bangkok. These big tourist party areas are always going to attract people looking to take advantage of the drunk tourists. If you are planning on engaging in the local nightlife, you need to follow the normal safety precautions. Don't leave your drinks unattended and try sticking to bottled or canned beer so as to avoid the risk of fake alcohol that has been spiked with methanol. If you've got any questions about visiting Thailand or Vietnam, let me know in the comments and I'll try to answer every single one. If you're a budget traveler, you'll be happy to know that you can get clean, cockroach-free, and affordable hotels in both countries, as long as you follow a few key steps. In Vietnam, we mostly ended up staying in what were called homestays, but they were really just family-run hotels. The homestay we stayed at in Hanoi was top-notch, with the owner providing an incredibly personal experience. The best part was the location, which was just far enough away from all the tourist sites to be a local's neighborhood, but still only a 5-minute grab ride away from when we wanted to see some of the tourist sites. During our entire Vietnam trip, we never paid more than $25 a night for a hotel, even in tourist hotspots like Hoi An and Hanoi. We also had breakfast included at every hotel we stayed at. The trick is to find hotels that are on the outskirts of the main tourist areas, as this will get you the best pricing, but also the best experience. However, most of these small places in Vietnam do not accept credit cards, so make sure you've taken out enough local currency to pay for your stay when you arrive. Thailand is a similar story, although we mostly stayed at local hotels as opposed to homestays. Once again, the trick was to avoid being in the heart of the tourist areas. In Bangkok, we found our favorite hotel that we keep returning to. In the last year, we've probably spent over a month at that hotel because within a 15-minute walk, there's a local coffee lady, pastry lady, smoothie lady, and of course our favorite curry stall. Every hotel we stayed at in Thailand was the equivalent of a solid 3-star hotel. They don't usually have any major amenities, but you can expect a clean room, cold AC, and friendly service. The best part is that we rarely paid more than $25 a night. Another advantage of Thailand is that most of the hotels enable you to book and pay via the major hotel booking sites. The benefit of this is that you don't have to constantly take out large amounts of local cash and deal with the ensuing ATM fees, unlike Vietnam. To find the best hotels, I recommend searching in Google Maps. This method allows you to filter by almost all the criteria you need, such as price and review score. The filters don't work in all countries though, so if it doesn't work for you initially, then try putting on a VPN for either the US or Australia. Once you've found some hotels that look good, make sure you don't trust the overall review rating and sort by the lowest first. I've seen plenty of examples in Vietnam where they've inflated their ratings with fake reviews, and I discovered tons of red flags by looking at the lowest reviews first. This method works great, but I can tell you from experience that it is very time consuming to find the best hotels, especially if you're trying to stick to a budget. If you feel like saving yourself hundreds of hours of research trying to find the best hotels, you can just download our maps for each country by scanning the QR code on the screen. For both Thailand and Vietnam, we've marked all the hotels we've stayed at and recommend. Regardless of which country you're traveling to, I would suggest avoiding the major Western hotel chains. Unless you're seeking a 5-star luxury experience, there's just no need to pay for the name. We've read so many reviews of people complaining and being shocked that the hotel was listed as Ibis, Hyatt, etc. when it didn't live up to the standard that they were used to from back home. One country has visa-free access, but changes its rules more often than a teenager deciding what to wear. The other country requires you to apply and pay for a visa before you can even set foot in the country. If you're traveling from the US, Canada, or Australia, you will need to apply for a proper visa before you can enter Vietnam. Technically, it can be approved within 3 business days, but I would strongly urge you to not cut it that close. Last time we applied, it took about 4 business days. And I've read a lot of comments from people that their initial application was rejected because somehow the information they had entered was wrong, so you need to leave enough time for the system to mess up. Your best bet is to apply for your Vietnam visa as soon as you've booked your flights. Once you've got your visa, you'll be allowed to stay in Vietnam for up to 90 days. If you fall in love with a country and want to spend more time, most people end up doing a border run for a few days in order to leave the country and apply for a new visa. Now let's talk about Thailand. The majority of Western tourists do not need a visa for Thailand. A digital arrivals card called the TDAC was rolled out recently, which you can only fill out within 3 days of arrival, but that's not a visa. The visa rules for Thailand have changed so often in the last few years that it's getting hard to keep track of what the actual current rules are. And the Google search assist usually gets the answer wrong, which confuses a lot of travelers. So here's the correct answer as of the time of filming this video. Visa-free travelers are allowed to stay in Thailand for 60 days, and most of those countries can also extend it by another 30 days at the local immigration office in Thailand. If you fall in love with Thailand and you want to stay even longer, then you can consider applying for the DTV visa, often referred to as the Digital Nomad visa. To qualify, you generally have to enroll in a Thai soft power course such as Thai cooking or Muay Thai. If you want to explore the country on your own and get off the tourist trail, then there's a very clear winner between Vietnam and Thailand. Let's start by comparing what it's like to travel across the different countries by bus. Thailand relies very heavily on minibuses, even for longer journeys. These are generally horribly cramped with basically zero legroom if you're a taller person. There's also limited space for your suitcases. If you're traveling with a lot of luggage or big luggage, then you need to be one of the first people on the bus. Even for longer journeys in Thailand that use a proper bus, you can forget about the concept of legroom. And if you're a taller person, you really have to hope that there are some spare seats so you don't get deep vein thrombosis. When it comes to comfort and cost, Vietnam is the best country for bus travel. For very little money, you can get a VIP bus with large comfortable seats that recline. For longer distances, they also have sleeper buses, so you can completely stretch out. However, the sleeper buses are very much designed for local travelers. So, if you're taller than 5'6", you will definitely struggle to fit. I'm over 6'1", and it was really awkward finding space for my legs. Trains seem to be having a bit of a renaissance movement currently, with an increasing number of people wanting to take the train to get around Thailand or Vietnam. Unfortunately, the train system is fairly poor in both countries, with both outdated carriages and limited departures. Our train from Lampang to Chiang Mai in Thailand managed to take 6 hours instead of 2 because the train was too heavy for the locomotive to pull it up the hill. This meant we had to wait for another locomotive to arrive in order to help push the train up the hill. If we had a rental car, that trip would have only taken us an hour and a half. In terms of the future, Thailand has started building out a high-speed network, but it's massively behind schedule. Likewise, Vietnam has had multiple high-speed projects that failed due to either political interference or a lack of resources before any track was even laid down. China has now proposed to build a high-speed network in Vietnam that would ultimately connect Ho Chi Minh all the way up north to the Chinese border. I really hope that this latest project succeeds, as it would be a fantastic alternative to the bus. But I'll believe it when I see it. For traveling really long distances, the best way to get around both countries is to fly. If you're not traveling with any checked bags, then the airfare can often be a very similar price to taking the train, or even the bus, at least in Thailand. Even if you don't have to pay more to fly, it's still worth flying because instead of losing a whole day on the bus or the train, you only lose a few hours. In Thailand, AirAsia is usually the cheapest option with lots of departures from almost every city. Just bear in mind that you always have to connect through Bangkok, as there's pretty much no direct flights between the secondary cities. For Vietnam, I generally recommend Vietnam Airlines as they're fairly reliable, and if you're traveling with luggage, their fares are very competitive since they include a free checked bag. Vietjet will often have the cheaper fare at first glance, but even if you're not traveling with a suitcase, they are notoriously strict at weighing hand luggage. If you want the most flexibility on your trip, you're going to need your own set of wheels so you don't have to constantly rely on a Grab being available. Scooters are ubiquitous in both countries, but there's only one country where all nationalities can drive legally. In either country, scooter rental companies are unlikely to check whether you have an international driving permit or IDP and a motorcycle license from your home country. This is especially true if you're just renting the standard 125cc scooter. But just because the rental companies don't care does not mean that the police won't. Driving in Vietnam as a tourist is a complicated story. First of all, it's impossible for a tourist to drive a car in Vietnam unless they have a license from an ASEAN country. It's also impossible to drive a scooter legally if your license and therefore IDP was issued in the US, Canada, or Australia. This leaves a huge portion of tourists in a gray area where they are allowed to drive a scooter or a motorcycle back home, but there's no way for them to do so legally in Vietnam. The good news is that depending on where you're driving, you're very unlikely to get stopped by the police. If you're driving around the tourist areas of Da Nang or Nha Trang, then there's a much greater chance of being stopped though, especially if you're the type of tourist that likes to drive around shirtless and without a helmet. If your dream is to drive the Ha Giang Loop, then you're basically guaranteed to be stopped and fined. The amount of this fine seems to change every year, and some people are able to negotiate it down a bit. But I would budget around 3 million Vietnamese dong for the fine. That's not going to destroy most holiday budgets, and the good news is that the police will issue you a receipt that's valid for 30 days. So if you do get stopped again during your trip, you can simply show the officer the receipt that shows that you've already been fined and have paid for the offense of not having the correct motorcycle license. Even if you're from the US, Canada, or Australia, you can drive legally in Thailand. However, the police will actively target foreigners in tourist areas. For example, in Chiang Mai, the police usually set up checkpoints at the main entrances to the walled city, and they stop tourists to make sure that they have the correct license and IDP. If you don't have an IDP, you'll receive an official fine of 1,000 Thai baht. In Pattaya, the most recent rules seem to be even stricter, and you can actually be forced to attend a court hearing if you're caught driving without a license. The good news is that Thailand accepts the IDP from all countries. So make sure you get yours at your local AAA for Americans, CAA for Canadians, or RAC for Australians. If you want to drive a scooter, then you need to make sure that category A is stamped on your IDP. Otherwise, you will still end up with a fine. If you want to explore Thailand in more depth, and you don't feel like spending hours in the boiling sun on a rental scooter, then you should definitely consider hiring a car. This will allow you to get off the tourist trail and see the less visited parts of Thailand. There's plenty of providers, and all you need is your license and, once again, an IDP. When renting a car, you might technically be able to get away with not having an IDP as long as your license is in English. But I would still recommend spending the 20 odd bucks for the IDP just to be on the safe side. We thoroughly enjoyed traveling through both Thailand and Vietnam. However, if it's your first time traveling to Southeast Asia, then Thailand is going to be a little bit easier. It's been a big tourist destination for decades, so the tourist infrastructure is a bit more polished compared to Vietnam. However, if you do have more experience, then traveling to Vietnam can definitely feel a little bit more adventurous. With that being said, the ability to rent a car in Thailand really opens up the whole country for exploring, which means that you can completely escape the tourist trail if you want to. Since you're limited to where the buses go in Vietnam, you will inevitably find yourself more on the tourist trail. Another great tip that'll help you save time and money on your next trip is to watch our latest video here.